Hi, Ryan Wolf here. Having trouble with intruders coming into your castle and killing your kings? Not anymore. With Inverness Security. Let's rewind a little bit. Not this time, Thana Caldor. Back to you, Kaylee.
Welcome back to Shakespeare Speaks. Last week we talked about Act 1 and how Macbeth interpreted the prophecy of the three witches. Act 1 came to a close when Duncan came to Macbeth's castle in Inverness for a feast. For those of you who don't remember, here's a quick summary of Act 2. Act 2 opens in the late evening with Macbeth running into Banquo and Fleance as he heads toward the bedchamber. The three men discuss the prophecy of the three witches. Once Banquo and Fleance exit the scene, Macbeth orders a servant to tell Lady Macbeth to ring the bell when his drink is ready. Once he is alone, Macbeth sees the shadow of a dagger before him. He begins his monologue by questioning his sanity and whether or not the dagger is real. Then his monologue shifts direction. He questions the morality of his conspiracy. Macbeth then makes the decision to go and kill Duncan before he loses courage. Macbeth stabs Duncan and goes into the bedchamber to meet his wife. They discuss if the deed is done. Then they discover that Macbeth had brought the knives along with him instead of planting them on the drunk guards. Lady Macbeth goes back into the bedchamber, stabs Duncan multiple times, and smears the blood upon the sleeping guards. She runs back into the room where they hear knocking. The porter opens the door for Macduff and Lennox, and they had a brief conversation. But right after Macbeth enters the scene, Macduff insists on awakening Duncan. Macbeth shows his resistance and shows him to Duncan's bedchamber. Macduff discovers the king's corpse and screams in horror. As everyone hears the commotion, Duncan's two sons decide it would be best if they run to another country and hide to ensure their safety. While these characters seem very intriguing, for example, Macbeth had a lot of nerve to kill a man just over a title, and Lady Macbeth seemed pretty ruthless over Duncan's death. Can you all elaborate a bit more on the characters back too?
Well, Macbeth, at first he came off as kind of weak-willed and timid, but I think that's just a byproduct of him being a soldier. He's just a trained soldier. He's trained to follow orders, and that's why he killed people in battle for Duncan, and then that's why in the end he killed Duncan for Macbeth. He took orders from Macbeth. You know what I mean?
Yeah, this is a great example of situational irony where he kills the man that's taking orders, that is giving orders, I should say, and now he's the one giving orders. So that's a pretty interesting development.
I think the way that he took that power is unbelievable, honestly. For someone that claims to fight with respect and honor for his country and for his king, and then to turn around and stab the king in the back or chest, actually. There should be something said about that. Like, he is just a very disloyal and a very sneaky person, because not only does he do that, just an unhonorable act, but then he plays it off like there's nothing wrong with that, and like nothing happened, and he has no idea about that.
And with this new title that he got, he shouldn't have it because he's still a weak character. He thinks he deserves the title, but he doesn't, and he lets Lady Macbeth control him. So she becomes his new commander.
And actually on Lady Macbeth, it's actually interesting how both personalities of Lady Macbeth and Macbeth are portrayed in the book, because Lady Macbeth is a figure of power, I would say, but she's a woman, so she doesn't get to, I guess, express that power in this day and age, in that time period. And Macbeth is sort of a weak character, so I think Shakespeare kind of switches the roles a little bit from the traditional personalities of a man and a woman that people portray.
Well, there's actually like a term for that. It's regent. So a regent is someone who is appointed to rule a kingdom in place of the real ruler who is incapable, incapacitated, or just unable to. So in this sense, Lady Macbeth is the regent for Macbeth, because Macbeth is just such an unable politician, and he can't make decisions for himself. So Lady Macbeth is pretty much ruling the kingdom kind of for him.
I think there was an interesting quote I've heard before it said that a man may be the head of the household, but a woman is the neck that turns him. And what this is saying, it actually is parallel to Macbeth, because although Macbeth has this title and he's supposed to have this like power, it's Lady Macbeth who really has the power and who has the control in the situation. And I think that, like Ryan said, these gender roles that Shakespeare loves to play up, like just the switching of them, I think it's just very important just to show that, women did have this power, because women only had this power when their husbands had a new status or a new title. That's the only way women could gain power. They had no power of their own.
So pretty much, Lady Macbeth is the new Dame of Galador, since she's basically running the kingdom through Macbeth.
Okay. Since Lady Macbeth and Duncan are both viewed as very powerful characters, what are your thoughts on Duncan?
I see Duncan as a symbol of wealth and power. He does not have many lines, and he doesn't actually do an action. Like, he's mentioned and he is referenced to, but he does not have like a major part besides his death.
Exactly, because he is a symbol, death is actually more important than he is as a character.
Yes, I agree. And the only thing that he actually represents besides a symbol of power in his life would be an obstacle for Lady Macbeth, for her ambition for power, and which led to his killing.
Since we just touched on Duncan, what are your thoughts on his sons, Malcolm and Donalbain?
Well, Malcolm and Donalbain, like Duncan, are obstacles to Macbeth's rise to power. And they represent, in the end, the consequences of Macbeth's and Lady Macbeth's reckless ambition. And so they come back to avenge their father's death. That was a huge mistake that Macbeth and Lady Macbeth made when they killed Duncan. I don't want to say this, but they should have killed Malcolm and Donalbain if they didn't want to be hit in the back by them in the end.
And now moving on to some side characters that aren't as important.
Okay. I think Banquo does not have a large role in Act 2, but I do think that right now he is a minor character, and I think his importance is the fact that he also knows the prophecy of the three witches just like Macbeth, so I think he knows the outcome, and he grows suspicious of Macbeth once Duncan is discovered dead. Like, he understands what the prophecy could say and what Macbeth could get out of Duncan's death.
Yeah, and he explains to his son Fleance at nighttime when Duncan's sleeping that he has cursed thoughts and he's restless. He can't go to sleep. This is also actually foreshadowing events that will come later in the play. It's also how he's, I don't want to spoil it, but it's just going to foreshadow unfortunate events that happen later in the play.
And now maybe one to another character, the porter.
Oh yes, the porter, he considered himself the gatekeeper of hell. I think that's very ironic since he really doesn't understand what's happening or doesn't know what's happening, but there are simple acts happening behind closed doors.
So he's also ironic in the fact that he has a very silly, relaxed attitude, which really is drastic from the entire mood of the second act, which is the rising action, the rising tension. So this is why he's very important just to this act, which is the only act that he's actually involved in. And I'd also like to tap into Ross and the Old Man, where they're not as important, I would say, as Macbeth or any of them, but they bring up some interesting points in how, very important how they relate they relate Macbeth and Duncan to an owl killing a falcon, which in nature, an owl usually doesn't kill a falcon. Like, they are, I think, from completely different food chains. Both are predators. So I feel like this is why they think it's similar to Macbeth killing Duncan, because Macbeth is Duncan's soldier and Duncan is Macbeth's king. Like, most of the time a king would be killed in battle or die of old age, but being killed by his own soldier is very unnatural, I would say, just like an owl killing a falcon.
And I think that doing this and causing these changes and you can say the circle of life will cause problems later on in the play.
And when we come back, Peter with his very own segment, Macbeth relating the act to the play.